In this video, I'm going to give you all you need to get started running a 3-5-3 defense for your youth football team. Now, I call this the simplest 3-5-3 only because way back in 2009 when I took this defense on, it was described to me by the coach who explained it to me as the simplest 3-5-3 he knew of. So when I went to make a video about this series a couple years later, way back, I want to say maybe 2013 or 14 on YouTube, I just called it the simplest 3-5-3. That video series did very well, but it was over on an account I couldn't access, couldn't monetize, couldn't do anything with. So I took it down, and now after a long time, it's time to remake that video. For this video, I'm explaining it for the use of a youth football team. Now, don't get me wrong. I used this defense coaching high school football for over a decade. In fact, we used this defense in 3 different locations and in 3 different schools. My staff and I were able to turn a team that went from last place in the conference or division, however you like to phrase it, to conference champs within 3 years. And this was our defense. Now, you have to do a lot of things to be able to win a conference championship within 3 years, but this was certainly one of the things that helped us win football games. For this version, I'm going to keep it even simpler, a simpler version than what we would run at the high school level. Now, it's not that I don't think a youth football team could run the same version that we ran in the high school level. However, the reason I don't think you should is because you don't have as much time. Most youth football teams are going to have likely close to half the practice time that a high school football team is going to have. And that's not just practice time during the year. You know, a high school football team gets together in the off season. You have a lot of summertime that you can make use of as well. And in youth football, you just don't have that. So I'm a strong believer that bad defense really happens more so because of mistakes and not because of a lack of so-called toughness. Now, in the video that I created titled How to Coach Youth Football, I explained that a lot of youth football and your success is out of your hands. You're really going to be victim of just how much athleticism is on your team. You can't control that, but you can control playing a good level of football and a brand of football where you don't make many mistakes. And this simplest 3-5-3 does a nice job of keeping you from big mistakes. Let's go ahead and jump in. Now, anytime you're talking defensive football, you have to start with alignment. Where does everyone go? And it is important to know how many mistakes in a game, big plays, are the result of poor alignment, even at the highest levels of football. So let's jump here to the whiteboard. We're here in the Huddle playbook, and we've just got a generic formation drawn up, and we've got our simplest 3-5-3 lined up to it. I've got our simple 3-5-3 drawn up to it. You'll see 2 defensive ends, a nose guard, 2 Ds, that stands for dogs, a Mike linebacker, 2 monsters, a hound, which is our free safety, and 2 corners. So we'll get into some details about each of these positions. Let's start with the D ends and dogs. Now we're going to group together defensive ends and dogs for the sake of this video because the 2 of these positions work in tandem all the time, or almost all the time. Now we're lined up in what's known as a 4-0-4 look. So these 2 D ends are in 4 techniques, which means they're lined up directly ahead of that tackle. It's like nose to nose. My nose should be lined up with his nose. And the dogs are lined up directly behind them. I'll show you this picture here of my athletes. This is what my dogs look like when they are in our base defense. And as it was taught to me, they're called dogs for a reason. They're kind of humping. They're right on the rear end of that defensive end. Now, the better these kids get, you might have them doing a little hopping back and forth, a little left to right, jab in, jab out, pre-snap. And that's just to give the offense and the offensive line, make them confused, not knowing exactly where that guy is going to go. Okay, now I wouldn't start off teaching like that, but I would work up towards that. For now, just stack them up directly behind those defensive ends. Now we really only have 2 defensive calls. Call number 1 is pinch. the defensive ends go in and vertical. Okay? We call it dip, rip, and pry. I want to step in. I want to go play. So if I'm this left defensive end, I'm going to step inside with my right foot. I'm going to dip my outside arm inside. I'm going to rip bicep to ear, and I'm going to drive my legs through and try to get into the backfield. Now, we are truly trying to get vertical into the backfield, and we're not worrying about things like getting trapped. We're just letting them go. Now, the opposite of this call is a loop call. So let's go ahead and undo those two. Undo, undo. And we'll do a loop call. So now I'm going to step out and dip and rip outside and get vertical. Those are our two calls, pinch and loop. Now you can do whatever hand motions you'd like, but we always used pinch and loop, like a hoop earring. This was our loop, always loop, pinch. So we are pinching or looping. Now I always wanted both ends going in or both ends going out so that both dogs always knew who their key was going to be. I didn't like one guy going in and one guy going out, even at the high school level. And the reason is the dog's key, so who he's looking at and responding to, is based off whether or not that D end is going in or out. So in this case, this is a loop call. The D ends are going out. They are looking first for the farthest back from them. While in this case, the dogs are keying near back. So here in this case, this is the near back for that dog. That's his key. In this case, the quarterback would be the near back for this dog. However, we do have one exception, and that's that a man who cannot lead block doesn't count as a near back. So in this case, this is shotgun, right? They've got one back next to them. The quarterback in the shotgun can't lead block. Now, I guess in theory he could, but I've never seen it. It's very, very rare for the quarterback to lead block. Maybe you're seeing some sort of a single wing type team. In that case, that guy could potentially lead block, so you'd treat him as a near back. If the man can be a lead blocker, he's a near back. So in this case, this quarterback, let's just keep everything generic for youth football. He's the near back. That is my key. So I am going to, on a loop call, I'm going to read step, and I'm read stepping straight ahead, if not slightly inside. Okay, let me undo these two. Make sure on a loop call that these dogs are read stepping inside. Okay, because your D ends are going outside, that is leaving a tackle and a guard with not a lot of trouble in front of them. So this dog needs to be prepared to really step up and get physical into the mix here. In theory, he's B gap responsible. Okay, so he's keying near back. If my key comes at me, then I must fill straight ahead. Fill, B gap. I'm B gap responsible. If my key goes away, we always say key away, backside A, right? So I'm looking to run through. I want to be a very aggressive player. Key at me, fill. Key away, backside A. Okay, those are the two things I'm looking for. And we're going to try to have drills and practice where we can practice this over and over and over every day. Now let's switch it around. Let's give it a pinch call. Dip, rip, pry, dip, rip, pry. Now my dogs are responsible for far back. So this dog, his far back is the quarterback. This dog, his far back is the halfback. Same rules. Key at me, fill. So in this case, in a pinch call, they are C gap responsible, right? So they're no longer B gap responsible because they're working in tandem with that D end. They are C gap responsible. So if my key, my quarterback, if I'm this dog, I'm looking this key, okay, far back. If he comes my way at all, I fill. Okay, now one mistake that I see a lot of teams or coaches that have just started to read this, to play this defense, and in fact, a lot of my lower level players, is my dogs, because they're so used to when they know they get a loop call, they read step inward, is now when they get a pinch call, they start read stepping and they're already going outward. Well, we don't want to do that. And we don't want to do that because they have to realize now my DNs are going in. The only reason we were read stepping truly inward before is because the DNs were going out and we were left with a lot of big linemen that were uncovered and we wanted to get someone in their face. Well, when the D end is going in, they're taking care of that. And you'll notice that, let's take this dog, for example. There's not a lot of uncovered linemen out here that are going to come down and get in your face. So that you're not in as big a hurry to get outside. So on a pinch call, I'd really like to just see these dogs read step forward. Okay, we call it a read pop. We just kind of 2 little 6-inch steps. Boom, boom, boom. That's my little read pop. So I would like to read pop. My key comes at me. I'll fill. I fill right here, right there in that C gap. I want to be really tight. I want to take away any air. I want to be hip to hip with this tackle. And in this case, this is my key, the far back. If the key went away, backside A. If the key came to me, I strike. I fill right here, just outside. I'm a C gap responsible player. Okay, so what you're going to see, of course, is that your dogs are really kind of interchangeable type players with your DNs. And then they need to be very downhill physical players, or at least as physical a player as you have, right there at the DNs and dogs. Now, we're going to play that game pretty much throughout in every down throughout the whole game. Pinch, loop, pinch, loop. Now, these dogs are not blitzing. They're just highly aggressive. To me, if they were blitzing, which we will once in a while call them blitzing, when I send them on a blitz, I ask them to hit the gap running, right? So it'd be like, set, go. And I am running. I'm trying to get a running start at this gap to go vertical on a blitz. Whereas when I'm not blitzing, I need to read pop, right? So I'm step, step, read. Now I'll react. I might be going inside on a backside A. I might be going straight ahead as I fill, depending on whether my key went toward me or away from me. Now, a couple other things you might want to do with your dogs that I like to do with my dogs, and I do think can happen at the youth level, are the following. Number one, if I have another player, another down lineman outside of my D end, outside of your alignment, we call them an overhang. If I have an overhang, I like to offset my dog a little bit. So I'll put my dog's inside foot even with my DN's outside foot. Okay, and that just puts them in a little bit better position to take on this extra surface, this extra man that they have to block over here. Puts me in a little bit better position. Another thought that you might have is if in the case that it's a longer down and distance, you could simply make a back call. And we have a back call, in which case my dogs simply scoop back, right? They're not truly up on the rear end of that D end. They'd be off a little bit, maybe up to 3 yards. And that's just going to slow them down. They're not as much up into the mix. They're not going to get lost. And it helps you in, say, a 3rd and 10 if you're going to ask them to get much depth on any pass drops. We ask very little. I can't say nothing, right? But again, I'm coaching at the high school level. But at the youth game, I would be very slow to ask very much at all from my dogs in pass drop. I would teach them part of our pass drop, which we'll get to later in this video. But if they were to not get there, I'm not on their case. They are run first players, and that's really where we need their help the most. Anything they can give in pass drops is a bonus. So if they ever feel like they're in no man's land, like they thought it was run, oh no, it's pass, and they don't drop, they just go ahead and keep rushing, I don't chew them out for that. They have the freedom to do that in our defense. Let's move on to the alignment of our nose and mic. Our nose and mic, they don't work in tandem quite as much as the defensive ends and dogs, but they're always lined up, head up of that center. Okay? So in this case, for youth football, your nose is he's going to choose a side. Okay? He's either going to dip and rip left or dip and rip right. Now, you as the coach, you could do a couple things. You could give him a signal. For example, you could call pinch right? And now you're saying your DNs are pinching, your nose is going right. You could, and for us, that a lot of times that was always right, because we would say like righty tighty, lefty loosey. So make your calls whatever you want, but you might go pinch right or pinch strong. You say go to the strong side. I think that's probably a lot to ask of a of a youth football player to know the strength. You might disagree with me, but I think that's a lot to ask. I didn't even ask a lot of my high school players to identify strength. We were just trying to match numbers. So you could tell him to move left or right. But the way it was taught to me, and I think the simplest way, is allow the nose to make a move the way he wants. Go left or right, your choice, but dip, rip, pry, and get upfield. Now, we do want you to turn and let each time. You could have a hand signal with your hound, or just turn and tell your hound each time you're going to tell him which way you're going. Okay, so the nose is going to turn around and tell this hound, hey, I'm going left. All right? Now, when the hound knows he's going left, the hound then is going to watch the guard to the opposite side. And the reason he's going to watch that guy is because now he knows that this guard will not be engaged by the nose. So if, on the snap of the ball, this guard does not reach at all for the nose, he knows that this must be a pass play, and he knows he can keep getting depth, because we're going to go ahead and by default, we're a cover 3 team. This hound is going to go ahead and backpedal. If on the snap of the ball, this guard goes chasing that nose, we know that's a run play. Okay, and he will very likely come right at that nose, come chasing him. Now, when it's a run play and I'm the hound, we teach him we want to go straight downhill to the depth of where the mic was, and then begin to chase the ball in the flow of the play, whichever direction that was. Now, some exceptions to when the hound will read that guard, if in the case there's only ever 3 vertical threats. So in this case, right, we've got 4 vertical threats. I've got 3 wide receivers and a tight end. So that's 4 guys that could threaten the field vertically. If I'm ever looking at a formation such as, let's say, the I formation, there's only 3 vertical threats here: 1 receiver, 2 receiver, and a tight end. In the case that if I ever only have 3 vertical threats, I'll go ahead and take the hound's eyes off of a guard, and we'll just go ahead and line them up, usually just inside of number 3, that 3rd receiver, which in theory, if you know football, technically he's called the number 2. He's the 2nd receiver over there. So we'll line him up just inside that tight end. Okay, let's say, for example, it was 2 split receivers. We would let the hound widen up a little bit and go ahead and have eyes on that 2nd guy. Okay, so in the case that we only have 3 vertical threats, we're okay taking the hound's eyes off of that guard. It doesn't really matter if that nose is going left or right. We'd like to have the hound's eyes on that 3rd vertical threat. Now, the only exception to that is if you get into a situation with 2 vertical threats, let's say a double tight power I team, right? It's not something you see a lot of, but you might see a double tight wing T. In the case of a double tight wing T, well, now 2 vertical threats, we will go back to eyes on that guard, because we like to really free up that hound of much pass responsibility. If you only have 2 vertical threats, we're going to go ahead and play it with 2 vertical players. We have 2 corners there. We'll let them play it. We're going to free our hound up to be really downhill aggressive player. So that's how our nose and hound work. Now, I know I started this segment, though, saying what about this mic? I was saying nose and mic. Let's go ahead and spread some guys out again. And now we're dealing with our mic. Well, our mic, for youth football, you want to just allow him to read the fullback. The fullback is that back that is closest to the quarterback, especially if you're dealing with an under center team. If I am dealing with a team such as this that likes to run shotgun and 1 back, I'm always going to put his eyes on the most dangerous. Okay, so each game, per game plan, you put his eyes on the one guy that you are most worried about. So if I'm defending youth football, do they have a Superman right here? Let the mic key him. If Superman is the quarterback and he's the real biggest threat, go ahead and allow the mic to key him. Okay? This mic linebacker and the hound really should be 2 of your best players, so you want to give them the running back key. You want to give that mic the running back key that has the best chance to give them to the most amount of plays. Now, one thing that I think is very important to teach this mic is how to run on what's called this J path. So you'll hear us say all the time, A to B to C, A to B to C. So let's say, for example, this back here is the mic's key. and this back comes in front of the quarterback and is taken off this way. Well, this takes a lot of practice, but this is your job as a coach. Instead of him, this Mike, seeing that this back is going this way, instead of this Mike just turning and chasing at an angle such as this, instead, we are trying hard to get the Mike's first reaction to always be downhill, and then he'll veer inside to out looking for the first opening. This is J path, A to B to C. I'm looking first for an A gap clearing, then a B gap clearing, and a C gap clearing as I get closer to the ball. So again, that takes practice. Kids don't do that naturally on their own. You have to teach them how to be a downhill player. We really want to avoid Mike linebackers, especially that play like this, right? You want to avoid that. We've got monsters outside forcing the ball back in. It is not your job to get outside of it. You've got to be a downhill player inside to out. Give you a couple different looks. Let's say they were in something like this with a sniffer back. I would absolutely have my Mike keying the sniffer. If they got into a true wing T look, a true under center wing T look, I would have my Mike keying the fullback. That's a true fullback. That's by default where we want our Mike's eyes. We want our Mike to be an inside filler. Now let's go ahead and move to our monsters. Now, one coach explained it like this. He's not going to look so much at the size of these kids on where to put them, but he's looking at the type of dog. What type of dog does he have? And I loved it was Chad Hetlett from Glenbard West High School that explained it like this. Like these inside three guys, these are Rottweilers, guys that are just dying to be in fights. And these two monsters, these are like golden retrievers. You say stay, and you could leave for a day and come back, and they're still in that spot. That's the type of kid you need at Monster. Now, at the youth football level, I think it's very important to keep their job simple. We're going to align in what we call bird technique, so it's 3 yards by 3 yards. He wants to be 3 yards back from the last man on the line of scrimmage and 3 yards outside. That is where that monster's inside foot is going to go. So inside foot should be in front, and his outside foot should be slightly back, and he wants to have his hands hanging low, almost somewhat like a wrestling stance. So then over here, this man also is 3 yards back by 3 yards out. And we really just want to be more like landmark players. Now, I tell these monsters you can move up to 2 steps depending on down and distance, depending on the situation or the formation. So for example, this monster over here, boy, he got 2 receivers split out wide. So if my default is 3 by 3, I could take 1, 2 steps wider if I wanted. This monster over here, let's say this guy came down to a wing. Normally he's 3 by 3, that's his base default, but boy, that is a really tight formation. I'll go ahead and take maybe 1 step closer. Maybe it's 4th and 1. 1, 2 steps closer. And maybe I don't like being right on the line. I can't quite get but my thing wants to snap up to there. I'll be closer. This monster, it's 4th and 1. Maybe he doesn't widen up 2 steps. Right, so we're going to show them, we want them to get really comfortable in that 3 by 3 position, and then understand that depending on down and distance, the smarter kid you are, it might be smarter here to move in, or smarter here to move out, okay? You might run into a team that has an electric football player here that's extremely fast, and you know your job is to not get beat outside. Well, move out a little bit. Give yourself a chance to not get beat. So by alignment, that's where these monsters are going, and their key is always in man on line of scrimmage. So the last man on line of scrimmage right here, they want their eyes right here, trying to look for, is this run or is this pass? If it is run, we want to come straight ahead right now to this point where the end man on line of scrimmage is. That's our aiming point in our first 2 steps, but we want to constrict whoever the first, did not mean for that to happen. We want to constrict whoever this first man coming to block us is, try to take only our inside arm. We must keep our outside arm free, but I'm going to take my inside arm and collision, constrict whoever's trying to block me, and then I'll expand to the outside. Darn thing is being stubborn. So I constrict and take on the block, and I'm free to expand to the outside. And this line right here is really important. We call this the cliff. 1 yard beyond the line of scrimmage, we said that's the cliff. Never fall off the cliff. We don't want to chase this into the backfield. When you go chasing into the backfield beyond the cliff, even if you feel like you're forcing it back in, you're actually creating a very easy cut for the running back, whoever has the ball. Let's assume this guy lined up here. He got the ball coming this way. You're creating a nice, easy lane for him, and you're not giving your teammates any time to fill. Okay, you have not affected the play at all. And so that's what we're trying to work hard with these monsters to teach them. Keep everything inside of you. This play must go back inside. The ball carrier must go back inside, but you need to affect his path, right? So in theory, you could just sprint to the sideline and the ball carrier would have to go inside of you, but you haven't affected his path at all. Same thing happens when you fall off the cliff. When you go too far upfield, you're forcing him inside, but you're not affecting his path and not affecting the play. So we want to get here in a hurry, find the man trying to block us, constrict it hard with our inside arm, and I'm going to start shuffling out as this guy tries to beat me outside. Let's say most monsters have pretty good speed. Oh, he's trying to beat me outside. That's when I expand and I'll go chase him down. I want to force him back inside. All the rest of my teammates are constantly reminded that they are inside hip players. My monsters are the only outside hip players in the business. Okay? Now, in theory, our corners, when they do come downhill, they're secondary force players. If they get forced with this task to make a play, we want them to force it back inside. But our monsters are known as the only force players. All of these guys, these 7 players in here, are inside hip players. Always chase, remember that banana path that I showed, always chase inside to out, knowing that your monster is always staying outside, working to force this ball carrier back in at you. And if you coach your tail off with that concept over and over the span of a 3-month season, your kids will begin to get pretty good at it, and it makes it hard to break really long plays on you. Now let's go ahead and talk about our corners. Our corners are cover 3 players. That means they are deep third, right? So maybe you're brand new to football. Maybe you have a ton of experience. But cover 3, it simply means 3 deep zones. This corner has this outside zone, the hound has the middle third, and this corner has this deep third. Okay, so we're cover 3 players, deep thirds. That's by default. Now, where do we like to line up our corners? Well, we do things differently. We line up at 10 yards of depth, and we flat-footed read. So we don't actually backpedal right off the get-go. If you are more comfortable lining them up at 7 yards and backpedaling, go ahead. I just see nothing wrong with that. But we've always liked to line up at 10, and we flat-footed read. So we just kind of go, we buzz our feet in place. Okay, so I could, if you ever want to reach out to me, I could share you more about that, or maybe I'll create another video. But the reason we do that is because we want people who are calling the offensive plays to look out there and say they're giving us short stuff, and we will. We'll give you short stuff. We want to discourage long stuff. We just like that better. So let's say, because it's more common, you're going to line up at 7. You want to split your vertical threats. Okay, I've got 2 guys here. I'm going to be in between them, and I can't just be looking at one of them. It's a zone, so my eyes are on the quarterback. Set, go. I backpedal. If this is pass, I yell pass, 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 and I pedal like crazy. If guys start getting into my comfort zone, I will turn and run. I must stay over the top of this and make sure any pass is completed underneath, and then I'll come make that tackle. Over here, my 2 vertical threats are here and are super wide from each other, so that can be a tough situation. We like to make a call in this case, and we're going to make sure somebody collisions this number 2 guy, especially when these 2 are really far apart, because that's too far apart for our corner to split. So in this case, our corner is going to hug 1, and knowing that we're going to get help on this tight end from a dog, and the hound knows that he would have to help on this guy vertical to the inside, and this tight end could be coming late. Okay, it's a little bit more advanced. If I don't have much time to practice, I'm not even going to talk about that with the kids. I'm just going to put them in good position and backpedal. Good position, backpedal. And what you're not going to stop every pass, but you're going to make sure that huge plays don't get completed on you time and time and time and time again. Put them in a good position, split your two vertical threats, eyes on the quarterback, backpedal. And when he opens to throw it, go chase the ball. You'll be amazed at what good defense you can play with rules as simple as that. Amazed. Let the kids be athletes and just don't be in bad position and go. All right, so I've covered the basics. I've got two things left to cover. Let's quickly touch on blitzes from this system, and then we'll talk pass drops, and we'll call it a vid. And then later I'll get into, there's so much more detail on this system. I created a 5-hour video series on like the high school version of it. You could find that. I'll link that below. Reach out to me if you have more questions. And again, I'll try to keep making more videos so that you have some answers to your questions. But if you are serious about going to this defense, I would encourage you to go ahead and buy the video series. It's an awful lot of great information you're going to want. So let's go ahead and talk blitzes. Now, blitzes, boy, you want to talk about simple. We take our guys and we number them left to right. The monster on the left is the 1. This dog is 2. This Mike is 3. He's 4. And this monster is 5. So if we call your number, you're going to blitz. So for example, now we always had a numbering system. You can make up your numbering system however you want. You could literally 1, 2, call out, hold up numbers to the kids. We always went like this. 1 was the top of the head. 2 was chest. 3 was a swipe, more like a belly swipe, but it didn't really matter. Mine was always kind of right across the chest. 4 was belly button or belt, and 5 was hand on my hip. Now, we called almost, we didn't have like infinite number of combos that we would call. We're pretty simple. We didn't like to blitz very much. Most commonly it would be something like pinch 2-4 or loop 2-4, okay? Or maybe a loop 3, right? So we're just going to call those out. Sometimes in a long yardage situation, we might bring a 1, okay? Or a 5 or a 15. So call what you want, but this is how we number it. When our linebackers always played left to right. You're the left monster, you're the right monster. So little Johnny always knew I'm the 1. If I hear 1, I'm blitzing. And truth be told, when 1s and 5s were going, most often, and this is at the high school level, so I would absolutely do this at the youth level, I would call in pinch or loop. And then I would wait to see a formation, and I know I want to send a 1 or a 5, but I'm going to wait and see which one I want to send. Maybe I'm going to send the guy off the weak side, and then I'm going to yell it in, hey, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. And my monster, who's the 5, knows, and here he goes. Now, one thing, let's talk about 2 little details when it comes to blitzing. Number 1 is what I said earlier, you want to hit the line running. So if it is a 1, then I'm this monster. Here I go. I'm going to come get tight, and I'm going to try to time up that cadence. Down, set, hit it running. Same thing for the mics and same things for the dogs. So the kids aren't going to do that on their own. You'd have to practice that, right? So you would want to work that into your practice plan, maybe once a week where it's just blitz timing. Work on a cadence, call out a cadence, hit the ground running, dip and rip. The second detail I'm going to tell you for blitzing that I believe is very important, especially for these monsters to know, we call it blood and gator. We say, are you on a blood blitz or a gator blitz? Now here's the difference, and I can show you this right here on this whiteboard. Let's assume this quarterback has kind of dropped back already. So we're going to put him right here. A gator blitz implies you are aiming at the heels of the deepest back. So this monster now, as he blitzes a gator blitz, I'm at the heels of the deepest back. If anything, I must make this man step up. Okay? I got to make him step up. So that's a gator blitz, and this is the most common. A blood blitz is at the toes of the shallowest back. So let's draw this one guy in on a gator blitz. Here he comes. Shallowest back. That's a blood blitz. Did I just say blood? Either way, that's a blood blitz. So when would I want to use each one? So we want a Gator blitz when we expect pass. We want a Gator blitz. If the goal is to blitz and to take away or provide some pressure on the passer, we want a Gator blitz. Blitz with depth. Make sure you're aiming behind him. If you aim right at him, fellas, and you might know this already, but this is a hard lesson to learn, and it's so painful to watch. When you aim right at him, that kid's one of the most athletic kids on his team. He's sitting right here, and he makes a little move, a little spin move, whoop, and he just spins you, and now he's rolling to the outside free, and meanwhile you're chasing him on this big long path, and you look ridiculous, and it just kill you as a coach. It just eats you up. So instead, practice this. Again, you can't just say it once. You have to practice this. This is a Gator blitz path. I am aiming behind him. I want to pressure him. Make him step up, and when he steps up, if he's running into my help, if he has nowhere to go, then I will get a sack. Right? It's way more important for me to provide pressure for the team than it is to get a sack. But that has to be taught and talked about on repeat. That's a Gator blitz. So when we want to provide pass pressure, okay, you can't even think about getting a sack, honestly. That's such bonus. You can't think about that. Can we provide pressure? When we want to provide pass pressure, we're on a Gator. Okay? So you could call it out, right? One Gator, or it might be per game plan. Now, when would we call blood? Well, we would call blood blitz generally when we have a quarterback who's been hurting us with his feet. Maybe it's an option play. Maybe it's on the goal line. And whatever the situation, like for example, let's draw this up. Let's say they came speed option right here on the goal line. Quarterback's coming right at you. This man here is running a pitch path, and we call blood blitz. Well, who's the shallowest back? It's the quarterback. You're aiming at his toes. We're trying to provide fast pressure right now. Okay? Yes, that pitch back right there has no one on him. All right, well, hopefully we could, if he were to pitch that and make it happen and be successful with it, hopefully we get some pursuit out of that dog. But this should happen really fast. What we're really trying to do is be disruptive. So either the quarterback wasn't expecting to have to pitch it, it's short yardage, and he wanted to keep it anyway, or maybe he does pitch that thing under pressure and throws it away, and it turns into a turnover for us. But that's a blood blitz. Our signal for blood has always been this. Okay, so 1 blood, 5 blood. So I think it's important to have those two different angles of blitzes. And again, don't just talk about them, teach them, and take time to rep them, right? So you have to get repetitions, repeated repetitions. What I wanted to say was, the thought of repetitions is doing it on repeat. So it's like more than one day. You're doing this often throughout your season because that's when kids start to learn. That right there, my friends, is our defense. This is very close to the defense that we ran at the high school level, from small schools to big schools, and won an awful lot of football games with these basic defensive premises, these basic defensive concepts. Okay? Now, a huge part of coaching defense is pursuit and communication, and there's so much more to playing good defense. But this should be enough to get you started on the simplest 3-5-3. If you have questions, look me up. My link is below. If you liked this video and it helped you, if you could leave us a little thumbs up, subscribe, those things would help as well. All right, guys, take care and happy coaching.